everybody, welcome back to AP Psychology with me, Miss Baines, your teacher, where you can take advantage of being able to pause and rewind me as I deliver you our latest content. So go ahead and grab those multicolored markers, get yourself in a nice and comfy space, and of course don't forget those ever important binder notes that go in lockstep order with this video called Unit 5, Video 7, Intelligence. Okay, so moving right along in our cognition unit to understanding intelligence. We're going to talk about intelligence and the theories about intelligence. So do we have intelligence or an inborn general mental capacity or intelligence, and can we quantify this capacity as a meaningful number? You need to think about what you believe in. Right? In this instance, what do you think about intelligence? Do you think that we are born with an unchanging intelligence, that we are just born to the capacity that we are born with and that's it? Or that it needs to be fulfilled, or that it can change over time, or it fluctuates, maybe objectively assesses and gives it a meaningful number to intelligence? So intelligence in all cultures is the capacity to understand the world, to think rationally, and to use resources effectively when faced with challenges. In research studies, intelligence is whatever the intelligence is testing or measuring, right? Which usually for most of us here in America takes place at some kind of a school. Right? We're measuring some kind of school smarts, okay? So you might say that someone is intelligent, but they actually don't have a very high intelligence quotient, which would be the IQ, which would be the number the objective intelligence test yields about that person's intelligence. So remembering the definition of intelligence, who is intelligent here? Is it Penny that is intelligent? Or is it Sheldon Cooper from that show, Big Bang Theory, about that guy, Sheldon, who with his clever friends and dare I say, ingenious friends, all hang out together and how they all interact with each other? Or are both Penny and Sheldon intelligent? I think Penny got a raw deal on that show. Well, it all depends on what you believe about intelligence, right? Sheldon Cooper is obviously what we would call historically intelligent, at least in the way that we usually think about intelligence. However, he's not exactly emotionally intelligent or socially intelligent, you could say, right? Whereas you might think the opposite of Penny on the same show, or maybe Larry the Cable Guy, right? That is that they are meant to come across as rather unintelligent. To make the show funny, they are less intelligent than the others around them. It has to do with conceptual difficulties. Okay, so a conceptual difficulty is when psychologists believe that intelligence is a concept, something abstract, not a object or thing that you can put your finger on. Right? So in other words, when we think of intelligence as a trait or as a thing, we are committing an error known as reification. Reification is when we view an abstract or material concept as if it were a concrete thing. Like, here is your pencil, here is your paper, here is your intelligence or your smarts, as if they're an object or something you can count. Intelligence that one can define and hold it as a thing or an object. That's committing reification, because psychologists argue that no, you can't hold on to intelligence as if it's a concrete thing. Right? This laid the path for two controversies despite general agreement among psychologists about the nature of intelligence not being an object. One controversy is asking the question, is intelligence a single overall ability or several specific abilities? And then number two, with modern neuroscience techniques, we can locate and measure intelligence within the brain, which of course is incredibly interesting. So let's talk about the first theory, which is given to us by Charles Spearman, right? So he came up with this idea that humans have what he called general intelligence. He believed that there is this one single, as in number one general factor for all mental ability. He didn't deny that some people have outstanding talents and that they might be super creative or artistic or might be really good at, say, speaking or have interpersonal skills, but he felt that these differences or those talents shouldn't blind us to a single general intelligence, and saying that there is one factor that a person has to make them intelligent. And intelligence is that one thing, right? It doesn't mean that everyone else is dumb or can't be talented. It just means that they don't have that one thing that is intelligence. So, Spearman proposed general intelligence, or G. Okay, we need to know what this is. What you need to know about intelligence being G, that G is linked to many clusters that can be analyzed by factor analysis that create a single underlying aspect of intelligence, and saying that we might perform well in many different areas, but that's all it is because of this one underlying aspect of intelligence. For example, people who do well on vocabulary do well with paragraph comprehension, which is a cluster that helps define verbal intelligence. Other general factors include spatial ability and reasoning ability. L.L. Thurston, on the other hand, is a critic of Spearman, and he says, whoa, we can't say that there's just this one big thing, right? He analyzed his subjects not on one single scale of general intelligence, but on 7 clusters of primary mental abilities that Thurston came up with, which were the following. Number 1 was word fluency. Number 2, verbal comprehension. 3, spatial ability. 4, perpetual speed. 5, numerical ability. 6, inductive math ability. 7, memorization ability. So later, psychologists analyzed Thurston's data, and a persistent tendency came between these clusters. Those who excelled in one area scored well on other areas, suggesting some evidence supporting a G factor that underlines that all intelligence is one concept, right? So Thurston, who came back here, said he was a critic of Spearman, right? But in the end, they were pretty much supporting G, because he showed us he was able to show that even in these 7 areas, if somebody did well in one of them, they did well in most of them. So they're kind of saying that that's like G. Here's an analogy to help you to understand this concept. Think of someone you know who is athletic. What is it that makes them athletic? Is it good eye-hand coordination? Do they have good balance? Are they fast? Do they have good endurance? Good aim? Good coordination in general? Yes, and yes, right? You could define athleticism as being athletically inclined to do or be all of the above. It's a good analogy having that G, and that you could say that an athletic person is generally going to be decent at any sport that they try. Yes, I know. Of course, they'll specialize in one sport, or maybe 2 or a few even, but they work really hard in that one area to become an expert at that sport. Starting out in whatever sports, they'll always have the ability to do somewhat pretty well, whatever sport that they're talking about that they're trying to get better at. I think this is a pretty good analogy for contemporary intelligence as well. Let's look at some of the contemporary athletes. Okay, first up we have Michael Jordan, arguably one of the greatest NBA players of all time. Plus, he also played in minor league baseball. And he happens to be an outstanding golf player as well. Next up we have Kyler Murray, former Heisman Trophy winner and former number 1 pick in NFL. But he did also turn down a major contract and a lot of money as a first-round pick for the MLB. Over here we have Justin Timberlake. Alright, so he's not an athlete, but he is a scratch golfer, and he's a very talented entertainer, musician, dancer, and pop artist. So it just goes to show you that there are many people who are intelligent in different ways and in many ways at the same time. And it doesn't necessarily mean brain smarts, right? Howard Gardner is our next big name. He supports Thurston's idea that intelligence does come in concrete multiple forms, meaning he does not agree complete with G, or one finite intelligence. Gardner notes, for example, that brain damage may diminish one type of ability but not the others, depending on what it is, so that people can excel and be intelligent. People with savant syndrome, for example, might excel in abilities not related to general intelligence or G, right? Being a savant or genius level at something, like remembering multiplications of large numbers or playing the piano at the level of a major classical composer, like Beethoven, at a very young age even, or drawing things from the shortest term memory with an exceptional detail. However, savants often struggle with emotional and interpersonal skills. And other areas of communication or cognitive delay. Gardner calls his theory multiple intelligences. He says there are 9 different forms of intelligence, and each one is relatively independent from the others. He believes that it's not how smart you are, it's how specifically you are smart. So these 9 being each of the intelligence, and you need to know every single one of them. So we're going to start here, up here on the left here, okay? Existentialism is looking, or the ability to look at life and look at death and our ultimate realities, thinking about, why am I here? What lies beyond this world? Who am I in it? Is there an afterlife? Second here is interpersonal. Interpersonal, as you probably know, is the ability to understand other people and how well you interact with others. Number 3 is intrapersonal, which is having an understanding of not so much how you interact with other people, but how you view yourself and your relationship with yourself, being in touch with who we are internally. Okay, next up is the naturalist, or ability to discriminate among living things, right? Biologists, having a sensitivity to the natural world. And then we have bodily, or what we call kinesthetic. You've heard that word before. This is our capacity to use our whole or parts of our body to be out in the world and or make something, or put on a production, or do a dance, or be in acting. Okay, fifth up is musical, or rhythmic. This is the capacity to think musically and with lyrics, to be able to hear patterns and recognize the beats and rhythms of songs. Perhaps you can even manipulate them and compose music or write lyrics and songs, not to mention play a variety of instruments. Okay, next up is visual spatial ability. This is how we access the space that we are in, our spatial world internally inside our mind's eye. Maybe you can draw architectural plans, or take a puzzle like Rubik's Cube and turn it around inside your mind and solve it, right? As a kid, maybe you could take some big giant refrigerator box or something and build a house out of it, or turn it into a spaceship, right? Turn it around on its different sides and it becomes a boat. Next up is logical mathematical, which is, of course, our ability to understand the underlying principles of some kind of causal system in mathematics. Okay, our verbal linguistic is next, right? This is my forte. This is our capacity to use language to express what is on our minds verbally and to help us to understand what other people are saying and talking about. Okay, so there you have Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. I always think of him having a little garden of smart children in all sorts of ways, being intelligent, to remember him. Maybe that'll help you too, okay? Robert Sternberg, our next theorist, he also agrees with Gardner and says that there is not just one giant G factor, but also not 9 intelligence, like Gardner. Sternberg instead suggests sternly suggests a triarctic theory. Tri meaning 3 components of intelligences rather than the 9 that Gardner came up with. So if IQ rules, that is only because we let it. And when we let a number rule us, we choose a bad master. That was a quote. We get ourselves into this big test mess, okay? So when he says instead is that there is one analytical intelligence, which is assessed by intelligence or IQ tests, okay? That is what we call analytical intelligence only. And then there's also a second one called creative intelligence, or intelligence that makes us adapt to new or novel situations, generating novel ideas. Novel meaning new. So new situations and generating new ideas and creativity and being exactly what your ability is, and having that ability to come up with things that have never been thought of before artistically. Okay, the third he called practical intelligence. This is the intelligence required for everyday tasks. So it's what we might, or what your parents might have called street smarts, right? The practical intelligence that you use every day with all different types of people. So Sternberg then proposed 7 types of people based on the combination of his triarchnic theory of intelligences. First up was the analyzer, then the creator, number 3, the practitioner, number 4, the analytical creator, number 5, the analytical practitioner, number 6, the creative practitioner, number 7, the consummate balancer of all of the original 3. So you should be able to decipher, given each of the names, what each of the next intelligence are playing a role herein. Okay, next up we have emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence from a psychologist named Daniel Goleman. Goleman believed in emotional intelligence, or EQ, as a set of skills that underline the accurate assessment, evaluation, expression, and regulation of all of our emotions and feelings. He says it's also incredibly important with this aspect of intelligence that underlines our ability to get along with other people. It shows that while individuals may not have a traditional high IQ score, they can be extremely successful due to their high emotional intelligence quotient, or EQ. Just based solely on the fact that they can read people correctly, and that a lot of times your success in your career, especially in sales and things like that, where if you don't have that, no matter how much intelligence you have, the intelligence that you're bringing is not going to go far. Emotional intelligence components are the ability to perceive emotion, meaning recognizing emotion and faces and music and stories. Understanding, perceive emotion, meaning to recognize emotion and help them to blend into a friendship or society. So also understanding the fluidity of emotions and being able to kind of verbally say, what is that emotion? Having the ability to express emotions in different situations, right? So your ability is to express and manage your own emotions in a productive way. And then use emotions to utilize emotions to adapt and to be creative. And you don't shun your emotions away or say, oh, I'm so terrible for feeling this way. Instead, you use it to understand yourself and others. Gardner and others criticized the idea of emotional intelligence, questioning whether or not we're stretching the idea of intelligence way too far when we're applying it to emotions. Plus, it has to be quantified in a rigorous manner, and emotional intelligence is really difficult to test. There's also some controversy surrounding the teaching of emotional intelligence, as many people believe that this should not be taught by anyone other than a kid's parents or their families, right, of our students. He believes that it is and should be our family who teaches us how to regulate our emotions and how to express ourselves. So let's talk about creativity, though. Creativity is our ability to produce ideas that are both new or novel and valuable. And they can't just be really cool and new, they have to be valuable. It has to correlate somewhat with intelligence, and it includes the following factors. 1, expertise, which is a well-developed knowledge base. It's kind of like your traditional idea of intelligence, right? 2 is imaginative thinking, so our ability to see things in new and novel ways. 3, adventuresome personality. So this would be seeking out new experiences rather than following the pack. Right? You march to the beat of your own drummer, keeping an open mind to all new experiences and not getting the same thing, say, every time you go to Mickey D's and get the same thing on the dollar menu, right? Maybe you reach out and go to a different restaurant and try, I don't know, frog legs, or in France they eat little snails called escargot. Not a fan. They eat it the way we eat clams, with garlic and butter, but you can put all the garlic and butter on. Knowing that that thing is a slug with a big shell. So this is seeking out new experiences rather than just following the pack. Next up is intrinsic motivation. So if you're motivated to be creative from within, not because you're being paid or rewarded in a creative environment, the creativity just blooms in creative and supportive environments. Next up is intelligence neurologically measurable. Recent studies indicate that there's some correlation about a positive 0.40, which doesn't sound really super strong, but in a correlation, especially in terms of neurology, it's a pretty decent correlation between brain size and intelligence. In fact, as brain size decreases with age, scores on verbal intelligence also decreases. And so, with gray matter, right, it is the concentration that is decreasing. It's about the density of that gray matter, right? There's a larger concentration of gray matter in people with high intelligences. So here's the thing. It's not saying that your brain has to be huge or gigantic to hold all the stuff that you know, or in order for you to be intelligent. It's just saying that it needs to be dense or thick or heavy, right? This is starting to sound like neuroplasticity to me again, right? So this is starting to sound like neuroplasticity again, right? So gray matter in your brain being where the neural networks are and where all the creases are, right? That looks like the intestines, all those folds and creases. That's where all your thinking ability is. Right? It's there for your intelligence. Then there's a higher concentration of gray area or gray matter in people with intelligent brains. Brain function studies of brain functioning show that people who score high in intelligence tests perceive stimuli faster. They retrieve information from memory more quickly, and they show faster brain response times. And that this is a true indicator of intelligence. Someone might have everything right there in their brain, but if they can't access it quickly and they're not able to show that they are in fact intelligent, therefore they are not. So people with higher intelligence respond correctly faster to the above question. To the above question on the long side of the left or the right. Is the long side on the left or the right? All right, that's all I've got for you tonight. Bye now. All right, everybody, have a great night. That's all I've got tonight. See you tomorrow. Bye now.
Next up, we have the two different types of intelligence. First up is crystallized. Think of this as the knowledge for the hard facts. In other words, it's the facts and skills that are acquired throughout an entire lifetime. The other is fluid intelligence, which is our ability to decipher information and make decisions, especially in new situations, which is more difficult at an old age, so it decreases as we age. Pretty much this starts to happen just past middle adulthood, maybe like right about my age. The Flynn effect is the idea that we have a trend of increasing intelligence scores as time passes. That's right, as you get older, your IQ goes up. Check this out.
What he discovered turned IQ research on its head and became known as the Flynn effect.
All throughout the 20th century, we can trace that each generation is scoring higher than its predecessor. That is, the average person on Ravens today is by definition 100. The average person in 1900 scored against current norms would have been somewhere between 50 and 70.
Trawling through huge quantities of raw data, Flynn noticed that IQ scores have risen on average by about 3 points per decade. He also found that the rise for black Americans was even faster. The IQ gap between blacks and whites was actually closing.
Blacks have gained at a faster rate than whites since World War II, certainly. Whites have been gaining something under 0.3 of a point a year, and blacks at about 4.45 points a year. In other words, blacks have been gaining about 50% faster during that period. Now, does that prove that the difference between the two isn't genetic? Well, it certainly shows that differences as great as the IQ gap can be closed environmentally.
Flynn's explanation isn't that we're getting smarter or that our ancestors were dumber. The fundamental difference, he says, is that our great-grandparents had learned how to manipulate the world practically. But we've learned how to classify it intellectually. If they were asked to explain the relationship between a dog and a rabbit, they are likely to have said that one chases the other. We're more likely to say they're both mammals. Flynn believes that in the last half-century we have undergone a profound change in the way we think. A change that few of us are even aware of. He calls it the cognitive revolution. Since the end of World War II, our everyday lives have become ever more dominated by the need to think in abstract categories. The explosive growth of science and technology in the workplace, at home and in our schools requires that we sort our world by conceptualizing it. In essence, we view the world through what Flynn calls scientific spectacles. Now, it so happens that this kind of thinking is exactly what's required to do well in an IQ test. Which means we can give a fairly precise definition of what IQ tests measure. They give a score not for intelligence as such, but for our adaptation to modernity.
Another phenomenon is called a stereotype threat, which is a situational predicament in which people are feeling themselves to be at risk of conforming to stereotypes about their social group. Stereotype threat is purportedly a contributing factor to long-standing racial and gender gaps in academic performance. Here are some examples. Imagine you are a female who is taking her driver's test. The instructor who will be observing and determining if she passes is an older male. She's keenly aware of the stereotypes about young female drivers in the eyes of men. And because she's so nervous about the stereotype, she ends up living up or down to the stereotype. Let's take a look.
I had an overwhelming sense of ickiness. Even though I apologized to Lucy, something was still plaguing me. Like Josh thinking I was mean was making me postal.
Move into the right lane?
Anyway, why should I care what Josh thinks? Why was I letting it throw me into such turmoil?
Watch out for the bike lane!
Oops, my bad.
What are you doing? You can't take up both lanes. Get in the right lane. Run some!
Oh, should I write them a note?
Pull over up here and turn off the engine. That right there.
Oh. Are you going to take me somewhere to make left-hand turns?
We're going back to the DMV.
It's over?
It's over.
Well, how did I do?
How'd you do? Well, let's see, shall we? You can't park. You can't switch lanes. You can't make right-hand turns. You've damaged private property, and you almost killed someone. Offhand, I'd say you failed.
Failed? Well, can't we just start over? I mean, I'm kind of having a personal problem. My mind was somewhere else. I mean, you saw how that biker came out of nowhere, right? Oh, I swear I'll concentrate. I drive really good usually. Isn't there somebody else I can talk to, a supervisor or something? I mean, it can't be the absolute and final word in driver's licenses.
Girlie, as far as you're concerned, I'm the messiah of the DMV. Now get out of the car.
I can't believe I failed. I failed something I couldn't talk my way out of?
I want you to think about an example for yourself and come up with another example. Try to make it about your own social group and have just enough political correctness and kindness, please.
All right, everybody, have a great night. That's all I've got tonight. See you tomorrow. Bye now.